Good morning, everybody. It is the ungodly hour of 5:21 a.m. Waiting for the stragglers. Next time we're just gonna post a time of 5:20. What do you think? Instead of 5:15. No.
I think
Anyway,
420.
today. Yeah, 4:20. Okay, so today is WX Live webinar number 64. Wow. Uncle Pete comes around again, and so does the Imagine guy, Glenn Rathke, with number 65 after this. So, with no further ado, we got the Uncle Pete coming to town with his fish.
Morning. Yes, I decided to do my webinar this morning on how to land a 20-pound drum. So, is that what y'all tuned in for this morning?
You betcha.
All right, well, I'll quit showing off. If I'm a little groggy this morning, I pulled him in around 1, so, bear with me.
Is that dinner?
No, I gave him to someone on the dock. Big drum aren't very edible. They're full of worms and pretty much a nasty fish, so not what I was after, but a lot of fun anyway. Okay, well, what we're going to talk about today is several different topics that put together make for some nice functionality inside your WebDev app. We're going to upload a file to the web server. That file is going to be an Excel file. We're going to process that Excel file and add some records to our table. We're along with that, what is it I said I was going to do, Arnold?
It's on that list.
We're using the Excel commands to make all that happen, and we also have a progress bar that's part of the upload that we're going to update that progress bar via AJAX as we move along as well. So let's get started. So here's our web page. If we run it, all we're going to do is see our products. This is a pretty common thing that you need to upload extra records, and instead of someone having to sit there and slam them out data entry, you provide them a function to be able to upload and import. We're going to use an Excel file today so that we can also look a little bit at the Excel commands. So the first thing you'll see is on your control toolbar, there is a upload control. And if you click the little arrow next to it, the ones with the little arrows have different options. The ones without arrows, that's the only control, you just drop it. But the ones with little arrows, the rating control, you'll see there's some different style of rating controls. And for the upload control, you've got a single file, several files, or other. And other is just the upload button by itself, and no additional code comes along with it. What we're going to use is the sending a single file. So if we drag that down, drop that on our screen, it gives us a total of 4 controls. Looks like only 3, but there's actually 4. There's the upload button, static, and that static is used as a drag and drop target so that you can drop files onto the page. The progress bar, and then the progress bar, you can't see it, but it is actually inside a cell. If you highlight over it, you'll see that at the very end it's in cell upload. The reason for that is it's going to use the cell display dialog to display the progress bar when we go to display it. So that's what you get by default. And all it's done is it's actually taken the upload button, the same as if you populated it, you're just the button, and populated these extra controls. And then it stuck some code back behind everything to do some work. So it's kind of like a sort of like a template to get you started. It's not really a super control like I think Glenn's shown you some super controls. It's not that. These are all separate controls. It just populates them all at once with some extra code. All right. Well, now, in my style, what they give me is never good enough, so I start tweaking on this thing. First thing I'm doing is I'm getting rid of the static used for the drag and drop target. I'll show you why here shortly. Next thing I'm going to do is move the progress bar. The hardest part of this is getting the cell selected instead of the progress bar. And how I am accomplishing that is using the Mini Explorer to navigate down to where I can see cell upload and selecting it. Now I can drop that, drag that. And what I did was I just dragged that into the center of my table. And we'll see what that effect looks like shortly. And I'm going to move the actual upload button down to the bottom. And I'm going to change the title of it. And also here you can couldn't tell, but what I did was press the tab key. This took me a little to figure out. It actually gives you, what the description is when you drop down and what the actual filter of files should look like. And you tab between the two. Now, the other thing is on the detail setting. You see it says allow drag and drop. Well, before I deleted that static, the static control was here. But instead, I'm going to choose my table. Makes a lot more sense to me. So now, when we get this thing all programmed, you'll see we can drag a file directly, just drop it onto the table, and the upload process starts. Here, our button seems to have.
All right, notice you got to keep drilling down that tree stuff to find what you want. Is that the easiest way?
Well, that's just because things are stuck in so many cells in this page design. It's weird. I'm not sure why my button suddenly went all flat there. Okay, well, I guess we won't worry about it, but that's a little odd because it's not the style chosen. It's just a normal everyday button. there it's back. For some reason it just got itself a little confused there. I've never seen that before. Okay, so now we've got everything positioned where we want it. Again, what we did was we got rid of the static, moved the cell with the progress bar up into the middle of our table, and then just changed the text on our button and then told it the target was going to be the table. All right, so now we can look at the code, and all of your code is behind the upload file. And this is the default code that comes with that button when we populated it. We've got to fix up that code for our specific instance. Okay. And this code over here is in pretty decent shape for, this is whenever you modify the list of files selected. So that's the trigger that says, hey, you've added a file to upload. We need to upload. I'm going to set the progress bar to 0. I don't need to mess with the caption of the static because we got rid of the static. Cell display dialog, that's what's going to show the progress bar, and then start the upload. And you actually don't need this else section at all. So that's all that needs to happen. Is if you were just doing an upload and nothing else, to trigger the upload, all that happens is when this browser event fires, which fires when you press the button and select a file or drag and drop a file, all it does is display this progress bar and then do the upload start, which that upload start is a WINDEV command. And myself actually contains the name of the file. So that's saying start uploading a file. Now the next thing that you have to do is in the receiving files, and notice this is a server event that's AJAX enabled, you have to do something to process that file. Otherwise, you'll upload the file, but it does not get saved anywhere. Nothing happens with it. WebDev copies it into like a temporary location and more or less just like holds it in a buffer until you're ready to do something with the file. So we don't need these conditional target code. I did a webinar showing you what that's all about for. Okay, so now let's copy all this code in here. Actually, let's do this. Oh, I copied it into the wrong place. I was wondering why I was getting there. There we go.
Where's your favorite snippet?
I'm got it open on the other screen, but it's got a lot of code we don't need that's specific for that project. I haven't made a example one that, once again, as most Uncle Pete's corners are, I'm programming as you watch. Okay. Tempter is a variable that my other project has. And let me go find that real quick for you so you can see what that code is all about.
So if you guys have any questions or comments along the way, type it in the chat like usual, or I turned on your mics. If you're not on the mic, just mute yourself up on top. You probably don't even have them turned on, but there you go.
Okay, in my project, Tempter is defined that. And that is where the databases are stored. And the reason that I'm doing it there is because that is a location that I can trust WebDev to have access to being able to read and write. The database directory, when you publish a WebDev site, you configure a sites directory, a database directory, a services directory, and an FTP directory. The database one is where it stores hyperfile, classic files, which means that it has read and write permissions to that directory. So that's a good place to also use for uploading files and so forth.
What about that FTP folder? Is that not?
The FTP folder, I don't think your WebDev site has access to. That's just used by the publishing, which is running under your WebDev account, not under your web account. Follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to make sure that it's a place that anonymous can read and write to.
Okay.
And there is an web data and an function also, but I've had a little trouble with the project I'm working on with that getting us the right results sometimes. So I wound up having to hard code this directory. I haven't played with it enough. I think it may just be an issue with that project.
So would you create a separate folder under that, like /temp then, or you just go right to that databases folder?
It's at that point, it's pretty much whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when this process is all done, I'm going to delete the file back out. So
okay,
it doesn't hang around. If you're if you're keeping them, you probably would, make a folder or what have you. Okay, now the next command is the first command that actually does something, and it says upload copy file, myself, tempdir, and then empty spaces. This is what's actually moving the file somewhere where you can access it. And this is the first thing you have to do is tell it the control name. That's where it's going to find out what file it needs to upload. This is where you're going to save it. And then you can rename it as part of that. So you could say, and it will rename it. Now, it's a little tricky. It's going to stick the extension of the incoming file on whatever name you give it here. So you do this, you're going to wind up with Excel import.xls.xls. All right, so I'm not going to rename it all, so I just put in an empty string in there. And then file name returns me the name plus the extension. So it doesn't tell me the path, but it tells me what the file name was that they sent in so that I can now reference that file myself. The next command is our first Excel command. And what this does is say, open the spreadsheet. Notice we're using our temp directory because we know that's where we moved it to, plus the file name that was returned by the upload copy file. So what that's doing is saying, open the Excel spreadsheet. We're assuming what you uploaded us was an Excel spreadsheet, because that's what we told you. If it's not an Excel spreadsheet, this command is going to generate an error, and we error out. So now this code here is where we actually need to process the actual cell file.
Yeah, I have an error handling question there.
Sure.
On the info, error info, so anytime you have an error and it doesn't automatically throw out an error, right? You have to ask for it like that?
It depends. Some errors actually generate a error, some errors don't. It depends on the severity of the error.
Yeah, like in Clarion, you have fetch and try fetch. So fetch throws you an error, a built-in error, and try fetch,
Right.
I'm responsible for that. So I was wondering if it was the same here.
For the most part, the way WINDEV WebDev works is, other than fatal errors, it's not going to throw an error of its own. The only time it throws an error is if it just can't do something, period. Gets a fatal error. Other than that, you need to test and display the error yourself always.
Okay.
Now, the fatal errors, you can capture those with on exception and handle those yourself as well with the error exception. And that's what these over here are for, is you can add that block of code to the end of your routine and do that.
Okay, so you're always responsible for errors coming
Pretty
up.
much, yeah.
Okay.
Is this mic on?
And you should be anyway.
Is this mic on?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
I didn't know. Pete, since that's in server code and you're doing an info error, is that message coming up to the user or is it coming up on the server?
When the AJAX event completes, that error will be displayed.
To who, though? To the user on the browser?
To the user. Yes, on the browser.
Oh, okay. I'm used to NetTalk,
but
popping up useless messages on the server.
Yeah, no, it will display it to the user. Now, there are some caveats to that. If you do something that moves off of this page onto another page in this code or something like that, then you'll never see that info box. Basically, what it does is it stacks up those info boxes, and then as soon as it returns to the browser gets those. So it's a little tricky. Like if you have some other code down here that's doing some stuff, because you didn't do a return here, this other code fires without you ever seeing that info. and until it returns to the browser, you're not going to see that info.
Oh,
So it doesn't happen immediately.
It waits for the server code to finish executing, and then
Right.
those JavaScript messages will pop up.
Exactly.
Oh, that's
Yes.
something to keep in mind.
Another thing I found.
That would be.
Another thing I found, if you.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, another thing I found. I don't know if I'm correct. If you have more than one error, info errors, which you want to display, it doesn't show them all. It just shows. I think the first one or the last one. I can't remember. If you kicked
I
off more than
believe it's the last one, but I'm not sure. And like I said, there are other things that'll happen that will cause you to not get that error at all. I've had it before where I wound up not
especially if you
not seeing
moving
the error
off the page.
whatsoever. Yes.
Yeah, I've noticed when you especially move off the page. But if you stay on the page, I tend to seem to get it. But if you move to another page, say, for example, you finish dropping and the guy clicks and goes to another page before this window is finished, you kind of lose that information or that info box coming up.
So there are some caveats to it, but as long as you keep it simple, it does work. And like anything else, it's something you need to test for your specific environment and what you're doing. Okay, well, we don't need this code because that was some more code that was for that specific project. What we're going to do now is process the Excel file. Actually, this code first.
Could you, in this case, you have the file name, let this expire and let the person know that their file came in all right and then process it? Or does this happen fast enough that it just says, yeah, we got your file? And
well, when we get all done, you'll see that I'm actually doing a progress bar, so they know I'm working.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which that's one of my complaints is, and I think that's what you're touching on. A lot of websites, you upload this file, it's doing some stuff with it. You don't know if it's died or what because you're just sitting there waiting.
Yeah,
but we're going to have a progress bar that's going to show both the upload and the progress of processing the Excel file.
Last night I just uploaded a bunch of data into a site that I did, and
fresh in your mind.
And the little please wait graphic waited till it had like 50,000 records in it before the graphic showed up.
Damn programmers.
Who did that?
Okay, so the next command I used here was this XLS, and like WebDev always does, they kind of prefix the commands so you can find them. So if you type in XLS, you see all of the Excel commands.
Oh, that's you're not working out of the XLS class then?
No, these are the native functions. There are some native functions for working with Excel.
Wait, do I have to have Excel loaded on this server then?
No, the native functions you do not have to have Excel.
That's where.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, they are now, they're pretty limited, as you see. This is the extent of them. Basically, you can move between the worksheets and touch data in specific cells. You can't get into messing with formulas and formatting cells and all that stuff. But if you're basically using an Excel file like a CSV file, which is what we're doing here, then yeah, you're great. So all we're doing is finding out how many rows are in our file, and then we're going to step through each of those rows and actually process them. And I start at row 2 because I'm going to have a header row at row 1. And you notice row number, I didn't declare it anywhere. This is one of the few oddities of WinDev. For the most part, you always have to declare your variables, but when you do this for loop, it kind of declares that variable on the fly. So you don't have to do that.
And the interesting thing about that is the scope of that variable is only within the scope of that loop. Once you try and use it outside of it, it's not available.
Really?
Really?
I wasn't aware of that.
That's pretty interesting.
Oh, that's easy.
How would you?
And
Because you're declaring it right there.
Right. And it's an integer.
Wow.
I guess I've never tried to use it outside of there. Yeah, I guess I'm following the proper technique, so I didn't know that.
Boy.
And I wasn't following the technique, and I got bit by it.
While we're on the for loop, something else to know about is this little thing. This took me a little while to get my head around. What the hell is the difference between these two? Well, if I hadn't done that, and I had put this command down here instead, this would evaluate that statement with each loop.
Ooh.
Which can be useful at times if it's something that's dynamic that could be affected by your code within the loop. But if this value is never going to change for your loop, you can do this. And that says evaluate it when you first come through, but then use that static value throughout the loop. Do not reevaluate this at the top of every loop. So that's
tricky.
That's another little, yeah. It's very subtle, and of course the help is in Fringlish, so I had to read it 2 or 3 times before I understood that. Since I'm using a variable, I don't really need to worry. It's the same effect either way for me.
And that technique can also apply to your OR and AND statement in the if statement.
There you go. Well, that's different because the OR and work if the first condition fails.
Yeah,
then it does.
But it saves a lot of conditional decision making if the rest of the or the AND is quite complex.
All right. So now we're ready to actually write some data into our files. I need to see what that file layout is. Okay, we're going to do, and we're not going to put a bunch of error checking code or anything in here because, I know you guys would not take this code and put it in production. You would do the right amount of error checking, except for Arnold. Arnold's just going to slam it in there and let her go. The rest of you would.
Yeah, you and I, we do that, don't we?
Well, my code's so good that I don't need any error checking.
I have error checking to be an example to the junior programmers.
I see. It's always helpful to think about the guy that comes behind you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or
I always say my code is so good it's just my user who doesn't understand.
Well, I'm the junior programmer, like in 2 weeks, you know, because I forgot what I did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sometimes the guy that comes behind you is you, and it's always nice to think about that guy. Okay, so our product file only has 3 fields in it. So this Excel file we're going to create is magically enough going to have 3 columns in it. Product name, description, and price. And all we're doing is saying that name equals the data contained in our Excel file. Notice when we opened the file, it gave us this integer pointer to the file. And most of the Excel commands, the external file commands, most of them use this pointer to a file methodology. That's exactly the way this is working. You know, when you open the file, you get a pointer to that file, and then you can reference that file throughout your code with a pointer. So you could have multiple spreadsheets open with different pointers and move data between or whatever. So we're saying we want the data from this spreadsheet, from row number, and our loop is setting that. So the first time through it's going to be row 2, then it's going to be row 3, on down the line until it runs out of rows. And then this is the column number: column 1, column 2, column 3. Now, in this example, we don't have worksheets. The native Excel commands do give you the ability to do worksheets, and so if the data were on a different worksheet within your Excel file, you could change the current worksheet first, and that command is XLS current worksheet, and that command will tell you what the current worksheet is or allow you to change it. But in our example, we don't need to worry about that. So at this point, this code would pull the file in, and it would add all of our records to the product table, but it would also do exactly what Chris was talking about. It ain't going to tell us it's doing anything. It's going to be nice and rude. So let's add a little bit of code to let you know what's going on. What we're going to add is right here. We're going to reinitialize our table first because we've added new data to it. We want that data to display. And we need to delete the file. Actually, here's the code. And I will jump back down and explain this code in just a second. Let me change this code up here first. Okay, now the progress bar in the normal one, in just the upload function, they've kind of taken care of the progress bar for us. The statements that were in the original code, for just the upload, the progress bar would just work. You wouldn't have to do any coding. But what I am doing is I'm saying I want to run the progress bar to 50% during the upload, and then the other 50% is my processing. so that, you know, instead of restarting it after processing, I'm just doing upload takes 50%, processing takes 50%. And, you know, as Microsoft has taught us all, progress bars don't have to be accurate as long as they're moving. Users know something's happening. And that's really what they're about. So you see when the upload starts, this progress of the transfer, this browser event fires automatically. And it finds out what size of the file is and how much of it has already been uploaded. These are native commands. And then it just updates the progress bar on that is something by default. When you populated it using that multi, it sets its upper bounds to 1,000. My simple brain likes 0 to 100. Makes life a lot more interesting to me to just do 0 to 100. You know, good old-fashioned 100%. And the other thing we want to do on the details,
granularity of that. You have a less smooth motion in the progress bar.
probably, but you know, again, it's all about just you know, letting the user know something's happening. So yeah, if you did 1,000, it probably would move a little, you know, a little more incremental.
Yeah.
But you know, of course, these are small Excel files, and the processing doesn't take long. So, but yeah, that is a good point. That in a big process, a more granular progress bar would probably be beneficial. The other thing I did was I went into the detail and I said, don't show the percentage if it's 0. And then I just formatted it. And the reason I'm doing 3 here is because if you don't, when it hits 100, you see a goofy format for a second until the screen clears. So I just formatted 3 positions so that it'll actually show the 100. We can also change that style so that our progress bar is a little more colorful. Okay, so back to our code. Now, the reason I'm doing 50 here, you know, I set that bounds from 0 to 100. So normally in your code, you would use 100 here. But I'm only going to run the progress bar to 50% as part of the upload. So I'm using 50 as my multiplier instead. And then this is just updating the progress bar directly. If you haven't worked with progress bars, they're pretty slick that way. You don't have to do anything fancy. You just set the value of the progress bar equal to its value within its bounds, and it displays properly. So in the you know, when it was 1,000, if we set the progress bar to 500, it would be dead center halfway done. Now this command is a command that they did not have in their code because, again, they didn't need it. What Gauge Activate does is tells the browser, hey, I've got a progress bar that I'm going to be updating the value of it in my AJAX code. And I want you to poll the server, find out what the new value of that progress bar is, and update the progress bar. See, they don't have to do that with the upload because they've got these browser functions that are doing it purely on the browser side. once we get into our code, we don't have that. We're doing it inside the AJAX loop. So we need the browser to go query the server and say, hey, what's the progress? What's the progress? And that's what Gauge Activate does, is sets that up. Now,
do you always have to do that every time they update the progress bar, or could you?
No, and yeah, I was realizing that earlier. I bet I could actually put that statement up here. You know, you just need to issue it once to set up so that the browser will poll the server. Now,
or would that be better in your receiving, at the top of your receiving file?
No, it has to be in browser code. It's a browser function.
Oh, okay.
This is server code.
Because I was wondering if you don't get to there until everything is done. You know,
I'm sorry?
Where you have it there.
No, here, this is the very beginning here.
Right, but doesn't everything happen inside the upload start?
No, when you select a file, this is what fires. Upload start actually, starts the server process. The browser code's still going to continue on. This is starting up a browser process.
Okay.
We'll see. It may need to be somewhere else. I just really I hadn't thought about it until just now. This is firing multiple times here, and really we only need to issue Gauge Activate once. As far as that goes, just to make it a little safer, we can put it up here. Now, here's the, you guys hear me talking about Fringlish all the time. Here's the help for Gauge Activate. The first parameter is the progress bar. The second parameter is how often you want it to poll the server. Period for refreshing the progress bar in hundredths of a second. The period is set to 1,000 hundredths of a second by default. Huh? I mean, I don't know if this is a typo or what, but my understanding of the English language is that would be 10 seconds. And I don't think that's what the default is. I mean, that'd be pretty ridiculous. It does give you a little note down here. The server should not be called too often to avoid performing too many requests. Doesn't give you any kind of hint about how long or how often or what. So I think this help could definitely use a little help. What I've set mine at is 25, which would be quarter second. So every quarter of a second, it's going to poll the server and say, hey, what's the progress? And the false, back over to the help. The false is the automatic stop.
Quarter of a second.
At the end of the server call, it automatically stops. And I set that to false because I'm going to actually turn off the Gauge Activate myself. What was that, Arnold?
Well, a quarter of a second, it just seems like that's continuous.
Pretty much, which is what I want. I want that progress bar. My process is only going to take a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
If I set it to 10 seconds, the users, it's going to be 10 seconds before the progress bar gets updated.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want, and that's something that you're going to, it's going to depend on the load on your server, what type of process you're using, how long it takes, what you're going to want to set that value to.
Yeah.
But this is in production, and we're uploading decent sized cell files with 200-300 rows in them, and having no server issues whatsoever. Okay. So that's the code to handle. This is going to handle us up to 50% on the progress bar. This line is going to tell the progress bar that we're going to be updating it in our AJAX code. And this is where we're updating it in the AJAX code. And all we're doing here is saying row numbers divided by total rows times 50. And then we're adding 50 to it. Again, if we were doing a 0 to 100, we wouldn't be adding 50 here, and this multiplier here would be 100. But we already are at 50% from the upload process. I'm using one progress bar to go from 0 to 100 as both the upload at 50 and then the processing the other 50. So I've got to figure out what this 50% is and then add my other 50 back in to update my progress bar. And then the multitask statement is what lets the server release for a second so that it can respond to that AJAX request. Without the multitask, it wouldn't work because the server wouldn't ever release itself to see if there's any other requests being processed.
When you say any other, is that back to the server for other users or other processes inside what you're doing?
Just this session.
This session,
because
wow.
Everything's at the session level. This progress bar value is at this session, so that browser is requesting information from the server specific to this session.
Mm-hmm. It takes a little bit of doing to get your head around that server code, browser code mix.
Yeah, it does, and that's the biggest challenge moving from Windows development to web development is you constantly are in this battle of what happens on the browser, what happens on the server, and how to keep the two communicating. Yeah. And that's a lot of times to accomplish that. We wind up using those hidden buttons and different things like that, hidden edit fields, because variables declared in server code can't be updated by browser code. Variables declared in browser code can't be updated from server code. But edit controls can be talked to by both. So we use a hidden edit control sometimes to get a variable back and forth. We wind up having to use buttons because browser can't fire off certain processes because it's browser code, but we're needing to fire off a server process. We don't want to do an AJAX execute because that causes a whole nother realm of issues. So we create a hidden button that has our code, and then the browser code does a execute process button, TRT click to fire off the code behind that button. So there's these little tricks, and that one there, I'm pretty sure it was Glenn that originally showed us the hidden button stuff. Those little tricks. There's 5 or 6 different little things that you kind of have to keep in your back pocket when you're working on WebDev sites to keep that communication smooth between server and browser. And code inside your AJAX, I will admit right now, I think I understand about 80%, but there's certain things that happen that it's like AJAX code runs in its own memory space, and sometimes I see updated variables from the other side, and other times it's like the AJAX code is seeing a static version of those variables from before they were changed. Where I get into that sometimes is with loopers, and specifically AJAX execute. And that's one of the reasons I like using the buttons with the AJAX enabled. When you use a button with AJAX enabled, WebDev kind of takes care of some management, where if you're doing AJAX execute, it doesn't. And it's when you do those AJAX executes that it seems like the code inside that procedure that you're calling with AJAX execute doesn't have that same level of access to the most current data that the other code does. And it may have something to do with when you press a button, you submit the values to the server. But when you do AJAX execute, you haven't submitted those values to the server. So the things that have been changed on the screen, you don't see those. And I ran into that this week with the clickable image, and we'll probably discuss that in a future session. Is clickable images don't submit the values to the server. Buttons do. And let me just show you that real quick, because that is an important thing to know. This little option right here, send the values to the server, reinitialize the page controls, or none. By default, you see it says send the values to the server. What that means is if you have a bunch of edit controls on the screen, the server is going to know about any changes you made in those controls. But if you set this to none, the server sees the value of those controls prior to you making any changes, because you haven't submitted the changes to the server. And that's the issue with AJAX execute, is you haven't submitted those values to the server yet. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're doing code in AJAX execute, it's not going to know about changes you made to the screen. And I haven't found a command that'll do this submit other than on a button. By pressing a button, I don't know of any other way to make this action right here take place. Have you ran into that, Glenn?
I have, and I don't have an answer for that either. Any other way to do the submit on that?
Yeah, you would think that there would be a command, like page to source kind of command, that would take care of that, but I don't know what it is. I haven't found it either. So that's something to keep in mind. And the problem I ran into this week was I was using a clickable image for my button, and notice on clickable image, there's nowhere for us to say submit to server.
Have you looked into page refresh? And I was just thinking of that. And that refreshes a page displayed in the browser on the context found on the server.
I think that would be backwards.
Going the other way.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be the effect of a reset, I would think. But yeah, that's probably one that I need to fire off to PCSoft and see what they say. But yeah, and we'll get into this whole clickable image in a future webinar, because I had to do a lot of work to get something simple done because of that. So back to our code, and we're almost done. All right. The last thing we do is once the files have been received, we deactivate the gauge. And the reason we do that is otherwise it's going to sit there and keep pulling that server. And we don't want that to happen. You know, once the users, we've returned control to the browser, we want to quit polling the server. And then we wanted to close the progress bar. And we, you know, of course, we could put a message here that says, you know, thanks, your file's loaded or whatever. But that's the extent of our code. Now, if we want to see it actually work, and no, I'm not Julia Childs. I don't have one in the oven that's done. We got code, description, I think it's name, description, price. Name, description, price. Right. If I was a little smarter, I probably could write a function that would. You guys are now seeing that I am not an Excel wizard by any means. Okay, now. Feel free to hum a few bars of your favorite Himmel, Arnold, while I'm doing this.
Okay. Hey, Jack, are you there? You got a mic? So basically, this opens up a spreadsheet, right?
Right.
I gotta see what that looks like.
Well, we never actually see the spreadsheet. All we're doing is reading it.
Reading. Oh, in the background, it's reading
yeah,
it to pull in information.
Right. Exactly.
Gotcha.
And notice I changed that to 2097, 2003 XLS. I don't know if they support the new 2010 format. Do you, or 2007 actually format? Do you know that, Glenn?
I don't.
Yeah, I haven't. I have not experimented with that yet to see if they do or not. Okay, so there is our spreadsheet. Errors, schmears. Okay, so as we see, we got our table. Scroll through it. We can click the button, and you know, typical web browse. You know, it's letting me choose where I want to upload from. I could select the file, and it would upload it. I need to do quick. I need to add a filter to that so that we can see just our rows. understand if I did that right. I've never done that before, so I may have not done that right, but we'll find out. Now, what I'm showing you now is, remember we have the button, but we also have drag and drop. We can come select this file, and notice if we're here, the icon shows copy, but when we hit the table, it changes to link. And I don't know if there's a way for us to put something more intelligent on there. Possibly we can via the drag and drop settings of the table. I'm not sure, since it's really the upload that's handling that. And I tried to make the button be the target, and I could not make that happen. Apparently, the target has to be something other than the actual upload button.
Just a quick question. Is it a region which you can maybe use? Like if it goes in that region, it kind of highlights, so... Like
we don't have...
like as you come to a certain point, it puts a little kind of a graphic, there's a dotted border around to show that you hit the mark.
Yeah, you could. Of course, that's going to take up space on the screen, which is you know, what I was trying to avoid. So
no, they don't actually take up screen. As soon as you go to the yeah, it looks like all of a sudden there's a little group over the screen. Like Google Mail, Gmail, if you drag it over to the body of the where you type in the message, it kind of puts a little dotted box and says drop here kind of thing. I was just thinking maybe that's
Arnold, next week Wolfgang's going to demonstrate.
Okay. All right. Let me see if I can get that going.
Yeah, hey, if you can make that work, that sounds great. I'm not sure. You know, that's got to be some kind of drop target event that you do some kind of show and hide on.
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just thinking.
You may be able to do it. I think the issue may be that if you remember, we didn't actually have set up any drag and drop on the table.
Yeah.
All we did was tell the button what control was drag and drop. So I'm not sure how much of that drag and drop functionality we could take control of in this instance. You would have to take full control of the drag and drop, but that definitely sounds like an interesting one to play with and see.
I'll have a look at it. Let me have a look at it. If you don't mind, give me that sample you've done so far. They can work on that one.
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks.
All right, so if we drag and drop this, and you didn't see it because it was so fast, but
next time put 1,000 bar.
Yeah, you saw how long it took me to put 20 rows in, right? Of course, part of the reason that it's so fast is because we're uploading from a local machine.
Yeah.
Which definitely makes it much faster. But what we can probably do, that's what I was going to do, is go put I can't put a pause on the upload part of the process, but I can put a pause in my part of the process. What is there a wait command? Does anyone know off the top of their head what that command is?
I think it is wait.
Yeah, it's called wait if I remember correctly.
No.
There's one was called sys something. But that's in... I can't remember.
There is a wait function, but apparently not in web, only in Windows.
Okay.
I was thinking, because I just used that.
Yeah. Damn the luck.
You can do a chrono.
Won't multitask service wait? One of those work? There's also a thread suspend if you want, but I'm not too sure. Not too sure.
I think multitask. I don't think multitask will hold up. I think it just.
You could start.
Multitask 100 should wait 1 second.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. It should.
Oh.
I will choose the file this way so that you can see it works both ways. Okay, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
You saw the 50% was almost immediately.
Yeah.
And the reason we're not actually seeing the slider is because that style I chose apparently is not a very attractive style for this site.
The website.
I was expecting the progress bar to be red, but instead it just made the text red. Odd.
Yeah.
Actually, let's just go with the simple one. See what that does for us.
I would think the upload will take longer than the actual processing. I would slant it to 80% for upload and 20 or 10% for the processing.
Yeah, and again, that's going to depend on what type of processing you're doing, what size kind of files you're uploading.
There's a lot of variables there. Yeah, you're right.
And like I said, sometimes what I've done in these instances is I'll restart the progress bar, so I'll do the upload to 100, and then I'll do the processing. I'll start back over at 0 and run it back up to 100. But I just think it's a better user experience, even if it's not accurate. Just one smooth progression of the progress bar.
Yeah, at least something that gives feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Because the girls at the bank, if that progress bar were to go to 100 and then start back over at 0, they'd be calling me freaking out because it ran twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends on the application, the user, and what's going on with it.
And what they're used to.
Yeah. Now, so that did answer one of our questions for us is, and that was a nice catch, that my gauge activate definitely did not need to be down here. We only needed to issue it once. And let's not put in it. Let's see if that thing is 10 seconds. I don't think it is. That makes so little sense to me. By golly, it is. So by default, it only polls the server every 10 seconds. So unless you have a very long process, that's pretty useless.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. It all depends how much data you're loading up and all that type of thing, I think. If you've got a very quick process, you might want to update quicker. But if you know it's like a month-end type of thing, massive big data file, then 10 seconds is fine, I think. Once again, it all depends what you're doing.
On the web,
and of course, they're
control your server like it's a desktop.
Right. And that is the note that they have in their help file is that you don't you want to keep that time down to keep from overloading your server.
Yes.
So
and the purpose of
that's again, are you a internal site that is being used by 20 people at your company, or are you Amazon?
Yeah.
Going to be, there's a lot of variables.
Is two things though. Is one, you do want to show your user that something's happening, but you also don't want
keep the session live.
Time out. So what you're doing is you're just throwing a little data every 10 seconds to keep their browser from timing out.
Right.
Keep the session going
on a long process. So
okay, yeah, that's also
default. But again, one of the keys to that is that multitask statement, because without the multitask, it will still wind up timing out because you never release the process.
Right.
Okay.
That would have caught me. The multitask would have caught me.
Yeah, there's a reason I know that. Because it's like, why the hell isn't this working?
Yeah. But what I like about that multitask is kind of neat. It allows other processes to also get an edgewise in and get updated to screens and stuff like that in WinDev side.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it has some extra commands for redrawing the screen and some other things that you can do with it on Windows.
Which is very slick when it comes to it, because otherwise you have to, in Clarion terms, you have to put a timer and you have to loop through and trigger off again just to get some action on the screen, and it's not getting this not responding message on top. So, which is very nice in WinDev is that if you use multitask, it doesn't get this not responding on the screen if you put that multitask in and allow it to update the screen in it. It really makes your program responsive. It looks like it's there.
I've never had a big report in Clarion that causes the screen to go blank when somebody drags something over it. That's never happened to me.
Yeah. We do machine-to-machine stuff, and there's some comport stuff which is happening, and sometimes you have to kind of wait for things to happen. And that's where we use it, and that makes it very slick then.
I always get complaints.
In Clarion, I used to end up having to do a timer loop and kind of poll the comport finished in the process. If you put a comport analyzer on it, you'll just see zipping in and out the whole time, where this allowed me to actually sit and wait for the callback quite nicely without hanging everything up.
Right, yeah. In Clarion, my big reports, that the progress bar works as long as they don't touch the machine, but as soon as they touch the machine and drag something else over or whatever, then the screen quits refreshing because of that exact issue you're talking about. And now they think it's hung up, so they'll cancel out and then do it again, and they'll run the report about 10 times. And it's horrible. The ability to thread in WinDev easily and simply is
I love it.
Yeah, it really does give you some very simple ways to do some simple threading, and then it also has the advanced threading, where you can get into all the fancy stuff of making sure it doesn't bump into each other's heads and all that stuff. That's
overloaded. Yeah. I like that critical section, which allows you only so many at any given time, and then if some of them is threaded out, and then you kind of automatically kicks up the next one, which is brilliant.
All right. Any other questions?
No. You gave me a shortcut. That's all I say. Saved me bumping my head. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait till next week to see how to do the Google pop-up border drag and drop section.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that would be quite snazzy if we can get that right. But I'm going to try my best to see what I can get up to.
Where did the if statement come from?
Okay. All right. Okay.
He'll use the else portion. He's going to use the else portion of it.
I'll use a case statement or something like that. Switch statement.
That's right. If he can get it to work, else we won't be able to find him next weekend.
Nasty.
All right.
Okay.
I'm done, and I'm ready to turn the show over to Glenn. Arnold, if you want to stop and restart.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.